of this summit, or one of the key themes, is software eating the world. So let's change that up a little bit. Instead of talking about software eating things, let's talk about humans eating things, and go from there. So before we dive into food in of itself, let me set up two broad general set pieces here. One, if you look at our cohort of humanity today, we're the sickest, weakest group of humans in the history of humanity. If you look at diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, all these metabolic syndromes, we're at historical highs, and it's trending at a horrifying pace. I mean, we're all going to be obese, diabetic, and not functionally, cognitively that well. Obviously not sustainable. On the second hand, on the right side here, we have a cohort of people that are almost obsessively obsessed with, obsessed with optimizing ourselves, playing with inputs into their bodies and obsessively tracking how to live longer, be more productive. I think you can take that to extreme, and you have people on treadmills as they're working on their computers. And this group of people are what I call biohackers, and I'm one of them. There's tons of people like this in Silicon Valley and around the world that are really looking at humans as a platform, or humans from an engineering standpoint. So what does that mean? Well, my definition of biohacking is this notion that we can apply a systems thinking approach or a first principles approach to the human body. So being very, very thoughtful and rigorous around the inputs into our body, whether that be food, supplements, different protocols, to really drive certain performance outputs, our endurance, our productivity, our reaction time, our learning rates. So I think given the context of where we are at as a society, if computing platform was the dominant innovation platform of the last couple of decades, I venture that humans will be the dominant innovation platform in the coming decades, because it is so important that we solve a lot of these fundamental societal issues around just the fabric of who we are, our bodies. How did I get into this space? I'm a computer scientist by training, and when I sold my first company, a mobile app company, a few years ago, I was thinking about what I wanted to work on next. And if sort of as an engineer, you can break things down to layers of abstraction. So I didn't know exactly what I wanted to work on, but if I worked on improving myself, well, then I thought that, hey, I could be better at whatever thing that I wanted to work on next. And that got me down this rabbit hole of biohacking. People are tinkering with, ordering different powders and chemicals and research chemicals from labs in Russia, India, stacking their own nootropic or smart drug combinations. People are implanting continuous glucose monitors designed for diabetics, all these sorts of inputs and implants into the systems to start really tracking outputs. And I was too young to know what the homebrew computing club looked like in the 70s and 80s, but I imagine that we're cut from the same cloth, that biohackers today are that same group of garage hobbyists tinkering, instead of with silicon, tinkering with their own biologies. So you might ask, well, is this something new? We've always wanted to live longer, live forever, be stronger. But I think the inflection point of why this point in time is important now is because we can finally close the loop with outputs. So we have all these sensors. For example, I wear a continuous glucose monitor that in real time gives me a stream of data on my own health outputs. And that's becoming more and more prevalent and more and more widespread as these devices get more and more efficient, cheaper, and widespread. And I think if you look back in the context of computing versus biology as a platform, really the sensors on our phones and mobile devices have really stagnated. Like the iPhone 7 that I have is basically the same device 3-4 years ago, but just a little bit incremental changes in the number of pixels that the phone can have. But where it's really exploding is on the human body. So I think the potential here is really exciting. So given this framework, now we can actually think about food from an engineer or software perspective. We have the right paradigm of thinking now. So food is really just then an input into the human platform. And there's 3 exciting areas that I'm excited about, that are really going to impact how we consume and how we function as a society. One, the dietary intake that I take, the dietary input that I take, might be the same if we all eat the same meal, but my body's response is clearly going to be a lot different from yours or yours. And we kind of already know this intuitively. If I eat a steak, I might feel really good. You might feel really poorly. Let's be programmatic around it. Let's understand it from our genomics and program that from an a priori perspective. 2, fasting, or this notion of not eating, will be mainstream. Think about it this way. Exercise, no one worked out 50 years ago because physical labor, physical activity was just baked into our jobs. Now everyone's doing intellectual work, so we have to, as sensible people, bake back in physicality into our lifestyle. That's the same thing with food. We're going to have to, we've evolved through fast and famine periods. We have to bake back in the notion of not eating back into our lifestyles. So I personally do 36 hours fasted every single week. And I imagine everyone that's sensible in the future will be fasting. And the last point I want to make is that every piece of food will have a functional purpose, which brings me to my concluding thought, that I want to compare our bodies to how we drive cars. If I told you that you could drive a car, but I only let you look and open your eyes every 30 seconds and do a course correction, that's pretty insane. But that's how healthcare really is kind of like today, where we go check in our doctor once a year, maybe once every couple of years, and get our labs done and then have a hard course correction. With the functional inputs that we're developing and having the plethora of sensors to track these outputs, well, now we can finally close that loop and be continuously driving our bodies with our eyes open. So let's all live healthier, better lives with this whole notion of closing the loop and applying or thinking about the human as a platform or a system. Thank you.
Right. Geoffrey, thank you. How many of you, I don't want to prejudice the audience in any way, how many of you like the vision that has been laid out by Geoffrey, that think that this is the future and that you welcome it? Okay. How many of you think this is a joyless world, devoid of all pleasure and individuality, and you want no part of it? Okay, I'm with you people here. All right, so why do you want to impose this on us? Why do you hate humanity so much?
I think that's a false notion. I think when people think about biohacking, they're thinking about this androgynous, everyone's a clone of each other. My notion of this future of humanity is that each of us will have specific attributes that we really want to accelerate. So we will see more diversity as people optimize even more in whatever domain that they want. So I think you could take the dystopic view, but I look at, hey, we can actually just really, truly pursue the best optimal version of ourselves.
All right. Very good. Well, in praise of the singularity then and living beyond it, give him another round of applause, Geoffrey. Great job. Thank you.
Cheers.